In May of 2012, a blood-stained package arrived at the headquarters of the Conservative Party in Ottawa. Inside was a human foot. Canada was about to discover that the horror wasn't just real. It had been posted online. Luka Magnotta wasn't just a killer. He was a narcissist who turned the Canadian justice system into a global stage. But here's the part few people talk about. Authorities had been warned years earlier. A small group of amateur investigators had been tracking disturbing animal abuse videos circulating online. They followed the digital trail, and they believed the man behind them would eventually kill a human being. Today on Cold Case Archive, we examine the international manhunt that crossed the Atlantic and the twisted psychology of a man who wanted fame at any cost. This is the full timeline of the Luka Magnotta case, from dark internet forums to a maximum security prison in Quebec. Because in this story, the warning signs were already there, just one click away. It all began in 2010, 2 years before the murder in Montreal. A disturbing video titled "One Boy, Two Kittens" appeared in the darker corners of the internet. Most people turned away immediately. But a small group of Facebook users did the opposite. They started watching closely. They weren't police officers. They were ordinary people with an extraordinary determination to find out who was behind the screen. They examined every frame like digital detectives, a vacuum cleaner model, a specific electrical outlet used in North America, even the brand of the yellow blanket on the bed. Piece by piece, they began reconstructing the room where the video had been filmed. Slowly, a name surfaced from the fragments: Luka Magnotta. The group compiled detailed reports and sent them to police departments in Canada and the United Kingdom. Their warning was chillingly direct. This man will eventually kill someone, but the response they received was silence. Authorities explained that technically, no crime against a human being had yet been committed, and in the eyes of the law, that meant there was little they could do. Meanwhile, Luka Magnotta appeared to enjoy the attention. Online, he created dozens, sometimes hundreds, of fake accounts praising himself, spreading rumors, and taunting those trying to identify him. It was as if he was staging his own internet mythology. For the amateur investigators watching from their screens, it felt like a game of digital cat and mouse. But to them, the pattern was becoming obvious. The cruelty wasn't stopping, it was escalating. And in May of 2012, their worst fear became reality. What happened inside apartment 208 in Montreal would shock the world and prove that the warnings had come far too late. In the spring of 2012, Montreal looked like any other North American city going about its daily routine. But inside a small apartment building in the Cape Danish district, events were unfolding that would soon make international headlines. Lin Jun was a 33-year-old international student studying computer engineering at Concordia University. Friends described him as quiet, hardworking, and deeply focused on building a new life in Canada. In May 2012, Lin Jun agreed to meet someone he had connected with online. That person was Luka Magnotta. What happened next inside Magnotta's apartment would later become the center of one of the most disturbing criminal investigations in Canadian history. Authorities believe that shortly after the meeting, Lin Jun was murdered inside apartment 208, but the crime itself was only the beginning. What followed would transform a local homicide into a global manhunt. Days later, several packages began appearing across Canada. Some were sent to political offices. Others were mailed to schools. Investigators would soon discover that these packages were connected to the same crime. As the story broke in the media, police in Montreal launched an urgent investigation. The suspect was Luka Magnotta, but by the time authorities arrived at his apartment, he was already gone. The apartment showed clear signs that Magnotta had fled. But what investigators found inside left little doubt about what had happened there. The man who had once craved attention online had now become the center of a worldwide investigation. Within hours, the case was no longer just Canadian news. Media outlets across Europe and North America began reporting on the shocking details of the crime. And as the investigation expanded, authorities realized something chilling. Luka Magnotta had already left the country. The manhunt was about to cross continents. By the time investigators identified Luka Magnotta as the main suspect, he had already vanished. Security cameras later revealed that he had quietly left Montreal days earlier, boarding a flight bound for Paris. In a matter of hours, what began as a homicide investigation in Montreal had transformed into an international manhunt. Authorities quickly issued a global alert. Interpol circulated a red notice across nearly 190 countries. But Magnotta wasn't hiding in the shadows. Reports later suggested he moved between hotels in France, sometimes using disguises, sometimes simply blending into crowds. For someone obsessed with attention, the global headlines may have been exactly what he wanted. Meanwhile, media coverage exploded. News outlets across Canada, Europe, and the United States began reporting every new development. Online, millions of people were now searching for the same name. And according to investigators, Luka Magnotta himself was among them. During the days of the manhunt, he reportedly spent hours reading articles about the case and about himself. After leaving France, Magnotta continued east across Europe. His next stop would be Berlin, Germany, a city that unknowingly became the final chapter of his escape. On June 4, 2012, inside a small internet cafe in Berlin, Magnotta sat quietly at a computer terminal. The man who had triggered a worldwide investigation appeared calm, almost relaxed. He was reportedly reading news coverage about the Montreal murder case, scrolling through articles that described the international search for him. But someone inside the cafe recognized his face from the news. Within minutes, German police arrived at the scene. The arrest happened quietly. There was no dramatic chase, nor innocence. The man who had turned his crimes into an internet spectacle was now sitting in police custody. Within days, Luka Magnotta was extradited back to Canada to face trial for the murder of Lin Jun. But the story was far from over. The trial that followed would reveal disturbing details about Magnotta's motives and about the warnings that had been ignored years before. In 2014, the trial of Luka Magnotta began in Montreal. By then, the case had already captured international attention. Courtrooms filled with journalists, investigators, and observers trying to understand how a crime like this had unfolded. Prosecutors argued that the murder of Lin Jun had been carefully planned. Evidence presented in court showed preparation, travel arrangements, and a long digital trail leading directly back to Magnotta. The defense took a different approach. They claimed Magnotta suffered from severe mental illness and argued that he was not fully responsible for his actions. But the jury examined months of evidence, including the warnings sent years earlier by online investigators who had tried to alert authorities. For many observers, one question kept resurfacing: could this tragedy have been prevented? Within days, Luka Magnotta was extradited back to Canada to face trial for the murder of Lin Jun. But capturing Magnotta only answered one question: where he was. It didn't explain something far more disturbing: why he did it. Long before the crime in Montreal, Luka Magnotta had been chasing something else entirely: attention. He tried to build a career as a model and actor, appearing in small productions and constantly posting images of himself online. But investigators later discovered something unusual. Many of the online accounts praising Magnotta were actually created by Magnotta himself. He wasn't just seeking attention. He was manufacturing fame. And when the murder investigation exploded into global headlines, Magnotta finally achieved the recognition he had spent years chasing. For weeks, his name dominated news. Reports, online searches, and social media conversations around the world. But the attention he wanted did not lead to admiration. It led to one of the most infamous criminal cases in Canadian history. 2 years later, inside a Montreal courtroom, after weeks of testimony, the verdict was delivered. Luka Magnotta was found guilty of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison, with no chance of parole for 25 years. For Lin Chun's family and friends, the sentence brought a form of justice, but it could never erase what had happened. For the amateur investigators who had tried to raise the alarm years earlier, the outcome carried a different weight. They had seen the warning signs long before the world did. In many ways, the Luka Magnotta case became one of the earliest examples of how crimes can unfold in the digital age, where clues appear online long before authorities can act. And yet, the story ends with a strange irony. After triggering a worldwide manhunt, Luka behavior. They collected evidence, screenshots, timestamps, and digital traces. And they sent warnings to authorities, fearing the violence would escalate. But when those warnings were first reported, officials explained there was little they could legally do. By the time the world finally understood the danger, it was already too late. But the case still leaves an uncomfortable question behind. In an era where attention can become a form of currency, how far are some people willing to go to be seen? And perhaps an even more troubling question remains. How many warning signs appear online before the real world finally catches up? If you want to explore more cases like this across North America, consider subscribing to Cold Case Archive.